I'm gonna put the camera on you. Ready?
Okay,
Here you
take
go.
two. Okay. Is it what you think is real to be, is it really real? Or is it not really what you think is real?
When he
That's
puts
the
on the
question.
glasses, his voice changes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Well, that happens. That doesn't happen to you.
No,
This hurts my
I wear
throat.
glasses all the
I'm gonna
time.
take the glasses off. But no, so here's the thing. We've all heard of the computer simulation theory, haven't we?
Yes, it's
The
called
hologram?
Reality.
the simulation hypothesis. I believe I've heard about
Correct.
this.
Thank you.
Is this the hologram one, or is it the same thing, or is that different?
No, I
Well,
think what you're
the
talking
basic
about
idea-
is some physicists who think that the universe is a hologram, which is actually a really complicated physics thing that I don't really understand. But anyway, that's not what.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm kind of an expert on this because I've watched a lot of YouTube videos.
Whoa.
So I know
whoa.
what I'm talking about.
Okay.
But here's the thing. Some of those, okay, I do not have a good brain for understanding math and science and stuff, right? So the way my brain works with math and science, and I don't know if, I want to know if I'm alone or if there are other people who are like this. When
There's
I
many
am
people
like
with you.
when I'm watching a lecture or like in a class or something or sitting down and like, or reading a book and absorbing scientific theory ideas in my head, as I'm consuming it, I understand and follow along perfectly. But then like, as soon as I'm not locked into that anymore, it all falls right out of my head and I can't remember it. You know
Oh,
what I'm
well,
saying?
Aaron, you need to. You just haven't. You need the key. You need the key. You haven't locked it. The thing in your head.
You have to write it down, do homework. You have to lock it in.
No,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
No,
And
there's a literal
and
key that your parents were supposed to give you when you moved out and went to
Oh.
college.
They lost it. They told
Called
me about
homework.
That key. They told me about that key.
It's called homework.
So yeah, I forgive them. But anyway, my point here's the reason I say that is there's two I think really compelling bodies of evidence for the computer simulation hypothesis, and one half of it is all based on like particle physics and quarks and like shooting rays through slits, and it's really compelling and makes perfect sense. But I can't explain it to you because I forgot how it all works. So
Is it basically
Yeah.
the idea that like
you can
how
go watch
light
videos about
does
that.
different things
But the
at
part
same
that I
time?
do remember and understand is a lot more simple. And it's this idea that if it's possible in our reality, my voice just cracked. I know,
If.
that's why you're getting it. If it's possible to create, okay, if it's possible to create a simulated reality, right?
Mhm.
Then eventually we will do it, right? Probably.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
Sure.
and if we create a simulated reality, then eventually the people in our simulated reality would create a simulated reality. So the point is, the chances that we're the first people to ever do that in this like chain of simulated realities are incredibly slim. And the chances are we're probably somewhere in the middle of some huge chain of simulations, right?
Right.
Well, that's
So-
like philosophically slim, not actually, because like there has to be a starting point. That's the big question.
right. So,
of course. Well,
so
yeah.
what Aaron's
Yeah.
describing is because I've also watched a lot of videos on the internet.
Go on, just do it.
The thing he's talking about is called, it's this guy Nick Bostrom. It's called the Bostrom's simulation hypothesis, and he actually he posits three things that he thinks one of the three has to exist, and the first one is that either we live in a world where we will never reach what he calls a post-human stage, which he defines post-human as the capability of actually making one of these very high fidelity computer simulations of reality, right? So the first scenario is that it's incredibly unlikely, near zero likelihood that we will ever reach a post-human stage, maybe before we destroy ourselves or whatever, but we'll never get there. The second is that, or we will, it's impossible. Or mostly that people aren't interested in doing it. So it's kind of a variation on the first, but that it's not possible. And then
We
the
live in
third,
a world.
the third is what EJ's talking about. The third scenario that he said, and remember, he's saying that one of these three has to exist, and the third one is that that we're living in a simulation or close to one because of the thing that EJ just described, which is, if it's possible, it makes sense that it would have happened eventually because time is long, right? So it would have happened, and if if even a small fraction of the population, and this is the point, the mathematical point, Ryan, that he's making, even if a small fraction of these people decide to make these high fidelity simulations, because his whole argument is based on the fact that technology advances so fast that eventually it might become trivial to make these simulations. So even if a small fraction of our population makes them, there would be so many of these simulations that would all be fully populated like the world we think we're in right now. Each one of them would be. So you would, in essence, have all the people in the real world, quote unquote, the real world, and then that presumably maybe that same number of people in each of these simulations.
I get the concept. It's the Fermi paradox. It's all those kind of ideas where it's like,
it's similar to the Fermi
the mathematical
paradox, right?
proof is here, and it's just okay. Well, if you take it at the proof's face value, given a large enough X, therefore Y. Yeah, I get the idea. It's just
so this is my religion now, and I really believe this. And
well, then go on about your like why did it convince you?
Well, okay, like here's why. Because I thought about this really deeply for a long time, and I studied it, and I looked at like the opposition, and there are two, I think, compelling arguments for why this might not be possible. And the first one is that some people say that it is not possible to simulate reality because it would take a computer that's like, the computer would require so much energy that it would take like 1,000. I don't remember the exact details, but they like tried to mathematically prove that there's no way to run a computer that's powerful enough to do this. Now,
I don't think that's a good argument because that makes a lot of assumptions.
I have a few reasons why. First of all, who's to say that the reality that's simulating, the next level up reality, our gods, our creators, whatever, who's to say that they have the same laws of physics? Who's to say that they have the same limitations or whatever that we have in our reality?
Sure.
They might even have like put safeguards in place to prevent us from creating a reality.
I think that's a slippery slope argument you're making, though, because you could say that about anything that anybody says to try to disprove the argument on a.
Well, I know. Yeah, I know. That's true. But
look, he said it's a religion, not a science.
I have another argument. I have another profoundly powerful against that, which is that we aren't necessarily going to be using like silicon chips or whatever to make this technology. And every single night, every single one of us has a vivid simulation of reality presented to us when we're dreaming.
Sure.
And it's like, and I think about this a lot because when I dream, like there are people that I talk to and I have conversations with them. I mean, my brain is doing a lot of processing to create these environments. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but your brain's skipping a lot of steps, like it's using heuristics to cheat.
Right. And who's to say that they're not doing that? Like, how do you know that I am not right now some heuristic cheat?
Right.
Like, I think I'm not, or I'm going to tell you that I'm not.
That's a much crazier idea, though, because at that point, then you're basically saying that the past is actually being overridden every time you think about it.
But I'm okay. I think you're taking in good faith what I'm saying, because my point is that we don't know what technology would be used to make.
Right.
It might be technology or quantum technology that just hasn't been developed yet.
Yeah, because right now we're stuck at like we can only get so close, and we can't get any faster because of like just basically the distance of what we can work at. I get you. And if we have a better conductor or a trend like thingy, then we could do more X, Y, Z. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So just for me personally, I don't think that's a strong enough argument. And then I think eventually, I do believe that eventually we'll come up with some kind of really good simulation technology. And
Give
then
it enough time.
The second argument against it is that people just won't do it. Like, we'll choose not to do it. And I will never believe that.
No, that's also a terrible argument, I think.
It's a terrible argument. Like,
I hear a lot of people.
Like, video games and porn. That's my argument against that.
Right.
Those both serve purposes. Sir.
I hear a lot of people argue that use that same argument when saying that we shouldn't really worry about artificial intelligence coming to kill us. Well, if that were possible, people just won't do it. You know, like people just won't make an AI that is capable of doing that. And I think that's a specious.
DARPA will.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's when I start getting terrified about gray goo. That's where my real nightmares start coming in.
That won't happen.
But
you don't think gray goo will happen? Oh yeah, Ryan's the resident, like legitimately the resident.
That was a big annoyance I remember being in like the Nano Center. Like it's just not possible.
Yeah,
that's not possible.
Michael Crichton has a book about it, and that's why everyone started freaking out about it. But just like dinosaurs killing everyone, not gonna happen.
Right. Well,
unless they change the program.
as far as the simulation hypothesis goes, so there are some arguments I think that are compelling arguments in favor. So there, or maybe I shouldn't say compelling, but interesting arguments that are in favor of it, which is the. Have you heard about people talk about the cosmological constants?
Yeah.
That being, quote unquote, evidence for the simulation hypothesis. So the idea is like, why are there things like the speed of light that is this weird number, that is just a weird number that doesn't make, like, we don't know why. It's actually, well, the other thing is it's not that weird. It's sort of like a roundish number. But so why does that exist? Why there's no, some physicists anyway argue that there's no real reason why there has to be one. It's just all of our physics are controlled by it, right? So it could be just like in a computer simulation, you have to have these constants, like literal constants that are coded into the program to make things work in certain ways, and these cosmological, these physics constants that exist could be signs that something like that exists. I don't know that that's a great argument, but people talk about that.
Well, so you're straying into that other half of arguments for the hypothesis that I can't properly communicate, which are like all based on science. But there are other things about like particles, the way particles behave and everything that.
Well, sure. There's like the quantum mechanics based arguments. Like one that's easy to understand is like the Planck constant, right? Do you know what the Planck constant is?
It's like the shortest time and the smallest size something can possibly be.
Right. Yeah. Nano man Ryan over there, I'm sure, is quite familiar with the Planck constant. And it's literally the shortest.
It's the size of a cube in Minecraft.
Right.
It's the smallest something can be.
It's the shortest theoretical distance.
The size of a slab in Minecraft.
Right. And so
I'm just talking about Minecraft because Nico Nyoko said Minecraft is reality, and now I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, I did see that too. I was looking for a good in to bring that in. Good one. But yeah, so the idea is that the Planck constant is very, very small, but it's the smallest distance, like theoretical distance that can be measured. And therefore the smallest theoretical size that anything in the universe can be. And some people point to that as like you'll hear headlines of people say a pixelated universe, and that's, like I kind of eye roll at headlines like that, but some people will point to that. I heard another interesting thing about the simulation hypothesis, that somebody argued that if we are in a simulation, like imagine this, follow this line of reasoning. If we're in a simulation and there are people that are watching us, okay, then it is our duty to be as entertaining as possible so that they won't shut the simulation down.
There's a Star Trek, the what is it called? The Menagerie. There's a Star Trek episode from the original series that's basically about aliens creating a simulated reality just to like watch, like as their Netflix.
Right. Right. But this person argues that we should be as entertaining as possible, and that things like world politics and Trump's existence should be maybe are a necessary consequence of us keeping the simulation on.
I imagine when you have a simulation at that kind of capacity, it doesn't matter because you'll just spin up another one.
I feel like if they're just trivial, then they probably just get forgotten about anyway.
Whatever. Like you turn on a different simulation.
One day, what's going to happen is someone's going to walk into their living room in the real universe and be like, what? I never turned this off. Like,
that snow globe. I still have that snow globe. I should break it.
That's the terrifying thing. Is like the whole thing could just blink out.
So here's my
that's true no matter what. Like
right, an asteroid.
They say that if the sun burned out, you wouldn't know for like 9 minutes or something like that.
Or like if Yellowstone blew up, most of us would be gone immediately.
Right. So my thing about this, I think it's fun and interesting to talk about the simulation hypothesis, but my thought is like, I don't care. Like it doesn't affect me in any way.
No, that's true. That's true. That's true.
No. It's not an edgy. I get what you're doing, right? But what I mean by that is it's more of an existential thought. Like I don't mean it as like whatever as I present it, but like in sort of as an existential thought experiment. Like it doesn't.
It could have it could have practical, like, scientific applications, though. If we did figure out, like, you think about it, if we found out we were in a simulated reality and we kind of like started to understand the code underneath it,
right?
It's conceivable that we might be able to like do some like hacks or you know.
Well, that's
like,
what we're doing though the other way. We're learning the code through physics and such. And if we happen to be in a thing, then okay.
I worry sometimes that this simulation hypothesis idea is an excuse to reformulate the our understanding of reality, some philosophers anyway, to reformulate our understanding of reality and bring back like idealism in a big way. Do you know what I mean by that? So
see, I think of it as deification. I think it's an easy way to be like, well, okay.
Like the God in the machine that we live in?
Yeah, so we got rid of religion, or if we're a hard scientist, some of us, like some people are.
That's the other interesting thing is, what if we could find a way to communicate? This is where it also is just, I don't know, it's like a kind of thought experiment, I guess. But what if we could communicate with the people who made us, and we could, like, for instance, convince them not to shut us down?
Sure.
Or what if we communicate?
Give us an afterlife.
That's the tripwire, and then we get shut down immediately.
Horton hears a who. You know.
The other thing I thought about is, like, what if it's just a video game and there's some player. And like we really don't want.
You don't know Horton Hears a Who? The Dr. Seuss book. Horton is an elephant who finds a flower that's like a dandelion with there's a speck of dust on the dandelion, and he hears the entire planet of the Who's is on this tiny speck of dust, and he spends his whole time trying to protect it. And the Who's on the speck of dust spend all their time trying to communicate with Horton in a very like godlike way. So it's very allegorical, a very allegorical Dr. Seuss book. Yeah.
I mean, that's 100% the idea I think of it as. Like, thought experiment aside, there's no practical value of there being an X or Y below or whatever. It's just like, okay, well.
Right. Well, what I worry about, though, back to the idealism and materialism thing, is like that was the whole argument back in like Plato's times and whatnot is
we talking about like the shadows on the cave wall.
Yes, but that was one part of his idealism. But the idea was, people talked about back then, like, how can you distinguish between dreams and reality, and you know that reality is a construct of our consciousness, and that's kind of what this simulation hypothesis kind of can lead to with a lot of people, is that really, if it's a simulation, we are just, our world, our entire existence is a construct of our consciousness, and it's not an actual material world. Like, materialists think that our reality is a construction of, you know, outside of our consciousness. Our brains, our consciousness are a consequence of our physical brain's construction, you know?
Yeah.
So, and that annoys me, is my point. I find idealists annoying.
Yeesh. Woof. Well, that's where I get into the like, why does it matter?
Right.
Well, it doesn't. That's philosophy.
Right.
It's kind
of, I mean that in the nicest way. I don't mean it like that. Like,
one-star reviews from philosophers everywhere.
Yeah. Like I enjoy, and it does have a thought experiment purpose, but like this in particular, it's kind of like, okay, well, we can't do anything with that yet. So
Maddie Smith in the chat says the Truman Show is such a good movie, and that's exactly this. It's The Matrix, the Truman Show. All
that's
that
the other
kind
thing. Who's to say that, like, you know, there's many ways that you could define a simulation of reality. You know, it could be like the Truman Show. Who knows? They might be on like the next planet over, or the next solar system over, like just watching us through a telescope. I don't know. Who knows?
It's definitely fun to think about, and scary when I'm taking a dump and wondering.
You don't just play on your phone when you're in the bathroom?
Yeah, I do.